I woke up to a sound I didn't recognize. Not birds, not an alarm clock, not my mom's voice or the hum of our old coffee machine. Just a slow, steady beep. Mechanical, cold, too close. My eyelids were heavy, like they'd been glued shut for days. When I finally opened them, I saw white. White ceiling, white walls, fluorescent lights above me. A curtain to my right, half drawn. Machines to my left, blinking with numbers I couldn't understand. And then the pain hit. Dull at first, then sharp. My ribs screamed when I breathed. My throat was dry, raw, like I'd swallowed broken glass. My right arm was wrapped in tubing. My left wrist had a hospital band on it. ICU. The letters stamped into the wristband felt unreal, like they belonged to someone else. I blinked. Once. Twice. Where was I? What happened? I turned my head slowly, every movement a battle, and saw my phone on the bedside table. Cracked. A spider web across the screen. But it lit up when I touched it. 14 missed texts. I opened the most recent one first. It was from my mom. "We're in Italy, don't call us. You'll be fine." No punctuation, no emoji, no warmth. Like I had just texted her about a quiz I failed. Not this. Not waking up in the ICU. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. This wasn't a shock. Not really. This was exactly the kind of love I'd been trained to accept. Distant, conditional, performative. I scrolled up. The message before that was from 3 days earlier. "Don't overreact. It's probably just stress. Go lie down." That was the night I collapsed. The night I texted her saying I couldn't breathe. Saying I felt like my chest was caving in. Saying I needed help. And her response? "Go lie down." Now I was here, alone, hooked up to machines. My heart still fluttering with panic. My head still foggy. And the only words from my mother? "Don't call us. We're in Italy." They told me I'd been unconscious for 3 days. "Technically not a coma," the nurse said gently. "But your body shut down from stress and dehydration. You're lucky someone found you." Lucky. That word echoed in my mind like a joke no one should laugh at. They found me in my apartment, on the floor of my bathroom, crumpled like a piece of paper someone gave up on. A neighbor had heard my alarm blaring for hours and called maintenance. They found me barely breathing. I should have felt grateful. But all I could feel was numb. Because for those 3 days, when I was somewhere between here and gone, no one came. Not my mother. Not my stepdad. Not my sister. Not a single person from my so-called family. Just the neighbor, just the nurse, just the machines. And now, apparently, Italy. That was where they were. Rome, to be exact. I checked my mom's Instagram out of some twisted curiosity. There she was, smiling in front of the Colosseum. Cappuccino in hand. The caption read, "Finally living our best lives." I zoomed in on the picture. She was wearing the necklace I gave her for her birthday last year. The one she barely acknowledged when I handed it to her with shaking hands. I wondered if she even told anyone where I was. If, while sipping wine in Florence, she thought about the daughter lying hooked up to an IV thousands of miles away. Probably not. Because the truth is, I had been disappearing long before I passed out. Piece by piece. Year by year. Every time I said, "I'm not okay," and she replied, "You're just being dramatic." Every time I asked for help and she said, "You'll figure it out." Every time I cried and she rolled her eyes. My body had shut down. But emotionally, I think I'd been gone long before that. The doctor came in later that afternoon, asked me if I had anyone to call. I said no. Not because there wasn't anyone in my contacts, but because no one would come. They discharged me on a Friday. No balloons, no hugs, no family waiting with a coat and open arms. just a nurse handing me a plastic bag with my phone, wallet, and cracked glasses. "Do you have a ride?" she asked, her voice kind but already expecting the answer. I shook my head. She nodded like she'd seen this 100 times before and offered me a taxi voucher. I took it. Riding home in the back of that cab, every bump in the road echoed through my ribs. The sunlight felt too bright, like the world had kept turning at full speed while I was stuck in slow motion. When we pulled up to my apartment, it felt foreign. I had lived there for 3 years, but now it felt like someone else's place. Like I was stepping into the ruins of a life that had quietly fallen apart. I opened the door and was hit by the sharp smell of disinfectant. Someone, probably the landlord, had cleaned up. But not all the way. My coffee mug was still on the counter, a half-folded towel still draped over the couch. My phone charger was coiled neatly on the nightstand. Like the world had paused mid-breath. I walked into the bathroom. That was the hardest part. There, on the cold tile floor, was the ghost of me. The spot where I'd collapsed, where my body gave out, where no one came. I stared at it until my knees shook. Then I sat down, not on the floor, but the edge of the tub, and breathed. In, outside. Slowly, like the nurse had taught me. I checked my phone again. My mom had posted more photos. Now they were in Venice, smiling on a gondola. The caption read, "Deserve this life, no stress, just vibes." I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to call her and ask how dare you. But instead, I whispered to no one. You left me. On purpose. Because I finally understood. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't bad timing. This was a choice. They chose Italy, and they left me to die on a bathroom floor. 2 days after I got home, I received another message from my mom. "Mom, heard you were discharged. Hope you're feeling better. We're going to Capri tomorrow. Don't stress too much, okay? You've always been sensitive to pressure." No question. No, do you need anything? No, I'm sorry we weren't there. Just that. A half-hearted, tone-deaf sentence wrapped in sunshine and gelato. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally realized I didn't owe her a reply. Still, I typed. Then deleted. Typed again. Deleted again. Until finally, I wrote one word and sent it before I could think. Noted. That's all. Short. Sharp. Final. And of course, she didn't respond. Instead, the next day, she posted a story from a luxury boat, sparkling water behind her, Aperol spritz in hand. Sunset therapy. I was so angry I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. I'd nearly died. And the woman who birthed me was floating in the Mediterranean, pretending she was healing from something. But I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. This was the same woman who once told me depression was just a mindset. Who said anxiety was an excuse not to try hard enough. Who believed illness was weakness and emotions were shameful. She didn't know how to show up. And worse, she didn't think she had to. That night, I opened my journal. I hadn't touched it in months, maybe years. I wrote a single sentence across the page. I am not a burden just because they refuse to carry me. It didn't fix anything, but it was the first thing I'd written that didn't feel like begging. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was unraveling. I felt like I was beginning. It was always my sister, Emily, the golden one, the one who could do no wrong, straight A's, dance team captain, flawless social media, and most importantly, Diane's favorite. Yes, I called our mom by her first name in my head now, because mom no longer felt accurate. Mothers don't abandon their children in ICU beds and post beach selfies. Anyway, Emily hadn't called me, hadn't even texted. But then, late one night, I got a DM on Instagram from someone I didn't know, a girl who followed both of us. "Hey, I know this is random, but I overheard your sister at a party. She said you were being super dramatic about the hospital thing. She even attached a screen recording of a voice note being passed around. Emily's voice, laughing. Yeah, I mean, she was in the hospital, but it wasn't like that serious. Honestly, she just wanted attention. She always does. I listened to it 3 times, then once more just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't. She really said it. She really believed it. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe it was easier to pretend I was being dramatic than to admit something real had happened and she hadn't shown up. Easier to preserve her perfect image than to face the truth that I had suffered and she had vanished. The worst part? I wasn't even shocked. Because this was how my family had always worked. Keep it light, keep it pretty. Don't cry too loud, don't ask for too much, and definitely don't break down in a way that makes other people feel guilty. I closed the app, sat there in the dark. It was strange. I wasn't even angry. I was just done. Done trying to prove that I was hurting. Done hoping they'd suddenly wake up and say, "We see you." Because the truth was, I could be bleeding out in front of them, and they'd still ask me not to make a scene. I hadn't told anyone outside of family what had happened. Not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't want the pity, or worse, the blank stares people give when they don't know how to respond to something real. But word has a way of getting around, especially when you disappear for a few days without explanation. It was a Tuesday morning when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I shuffled to the door, still in a hoodie and hospital socks, hair tied up in a way that could only be described as post-survival mode chic. And there she was, Maya, my old roommate from college. We hadn't talked much lately. Life got in the way. Jobs, distance. That vague, "we'll catch up soon" promise we all make and rarely keep. She was holding a brown paper bag and a giant iced coffee. "You didn't answer your texts," she said, so I figured I'd just come by. I blinked, then opened the door wider. We sat on my couch, the one that still had a dent in it from the last time I collapsed into it with exhaustion. She handed me the coffee without asking how I take it. She still remembered. Inside the bag was a warm croissant and a banana muffin. "I didn't know what you could eat, but carbs seemed safe," she said. We didn't talk about what happened right away. We didn't have to. She looked around my apartment, at the untouched mail, the half-empty fridge, the pill bottles lined up like quiet soldiers. And then she said, "They really left you, huh?" I nodded. The lump in my throat was unbearable. But instead of crying, I just said, "Yeah, they did." And Maya, in her simple Maya way, just reached over and squeezed my hand. No lectures, no toxic positivity. No comparing my pain to someone else's. Just presence. Just someone being there because they wanted to be. Not because it was expected. Not because they were performing. Later, she took out her phone and said, "Okay, I'm putting my number back in your favorites. And I'm not leaving until you schedule a follow-up doctor's appointment." I laughed. For real. Maybe for the first time since I woke up. And I realized something. My family wasn't made up of the people who shared my blood. It was the ones who showed up with coffee, carbs, and quiet understanding when I didn't even ask them to. A week after Maya visited, I opened my mailbox for the first time since the hospital. It was overflowing. Envelopes stuffed in like someone had tried to shove my whole absence into a metal box and lock it up. I carried the stack inside and started sorting. Advertisements, coupons, a pizza flyer. And then, the envelope. Big, white, hospital logo in the corner. I knew what it was before I opened it. But knowing doesn't make it hurt less. I unfolded the papers and saw the number. $18,734. My heart skipped. Not in the poetic way, but in the, "you've got to be kidding me" kind of way. That was with insurance. $18,000, and for 3 days I can't even remember. For IVs. For machines. For the room they wheeled me into when my body gave up. And not a single family member had offered to help. I didn't expect Diane to cover it, not after Italy. But what cut deep was the silence, the lack of questions. No, how much did it cost? No, do you need help? No, let me see what I can do. They hadn't even asked. They'd posted about pasta and sunsets while I was being charged $400 a night to not die. I sat with the bill in my lap and just stared. Because it wasn't just about the money, it was what the money represented. The cost of surviving without anyone in your corner. The price of having to save yourself while the people who should have saved you were sightseeing. I picked up my phone, opened a new message to my mom. I wanted to type a paragraph, a novel, a scream. Instead, I typed, "The hospital bill came. Just thought you should know." I stared at it, then hit delete. Because what was the point? I knew what she'd say if she responded at all. "You're an adult. You'll figure it out." And she'd be right. I was an adult. But that didn't mean I deserved to go through it alone. It was supposed to be just another scroll. One of those aimless, numb afternoons where you swipe through social media not because you care, but because it's easier than sitting alone with your thoughts. And then I saw it. A photo, posted by my mom's friend. Someone I had forgotten still followed me. It was a group shot. Everyone smiling. Sunset in the background. A long table filled with wine glasses, half-eaten pasta, candlelight. And there they were. My mom, my stepdad, Emily, all together. Diane had on a bright red dress, laughing like she was the star of a commercial. My stepdad was toasting with another couple. Emily was leaning into a guy I'd never seen before, eyes twinkling. The caption? Family forever, blessed, vacation mode, grateful, grateful. That word punched me straight in the stomach. I was lying in bed, sore from trying to stretch again, dizzy from missing a dose of medication because the pharmacy ran out. And they were hashtagging #grateful? I zoomed in on the picture. There were 11 chairs at the table. 11. One of them could have been mine. If they had chosen differently, if they had asked, if they had even pretended to care. But I wasn't just forgotten. I had been edited out of their idea of family, intentionally. And in that moment, something cracked in me. Not the dramatic kind of break. Not sobbing, not screaming, not throwing the phone. Just a quiet, hollow snap. Like a rope worn thin, finally giving way. I closed the app. Put the phone face down. And for the first time since waking up in the ICU, I let myself cry. Not because they were gone, but because I finally believed they weren't coming back. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a sore throat from crying, but also a strange sense of clarity, like my body had finally exhaled something it had been holding in for years. So I did something small, something that felt almost childish. I grabbed a pen, opened my old notebook, the one I hadn't used since college, and I made a list. At the top, I wrote, things I deserved that I didn't get. It wasn't for drama. It wasn't for revenge. It was for truth. Here's what I wrote. A ride home from the hospital. Someone to ask, "Are you okay?" and mean it. A hand to hold when I woke up. An apology. A hug. We're sorry we weren't there. Someone to care if I lived or died. A real family dinner. A seat at the table. A place I didn't have to earn. Halfway down the page, my hands started shaking because I wasn't writing things that were unreasonable. I wasn't asking for diamonds or miracles. I was asking for the bare minimum. Love, presence, human decency. And I hadn't gotten any of it. I paused, then flipped the page. This time, I wrote, things I gave without being asked. Forgiveness. Silence excuses for their behavior. Understanding lowered expectations. Birthdays without complaint. Holidays spent smiling through pain. The benefit of the doubt. Every time the 2 pages stared at me like a mirror. On one side, what I needed. On the other, what I gave. And somewhere in the space between those lists, I found my anger again. But this time it felt clean. Not explosive, not destructive, just clear. Like finally saying, I mattered, even if they never treated me like I did. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Gray skies, rain tapping on the window. I was curled up on the couch, halfway through a book I wasn't really reading. And then the phone rang. Mom lit up on the screen. I stared at it. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because for the first time, I realized I had a choice. Let it ring, decline, answer. I let it ring until the final buzz. No voicemail. A few minutes later, she texted, "Hey, can we talk when you have a moment?" No punctuation. As always, like grammar had the same emotional distance she did. I didn't reply. Not right away. Instead, I set the phone down and went to make tea. Because that's what healing looked like that day. Choosing myself first. An hour later, I answered. Not because I wanted to, but because I was tired of pretending they didn't exist. Her voice was cheery, like nothing had happened. "Hi, honey, just checking in. How are you feeling?" How was I feeling? Was that a real question? Or just another script she was reading? I took a breath and said, "You left me in the hospital." Silence. Not a pause. Silence. And then, well, we didn't know how serious it was. You tend to exaggerate, you know? There it was. The old Diane. Wrapped in denial and backhanded dismissal. "I nearly died," I said, my voice flat. Another pause. Then, "Don't be dramatic." It hit me like a slap. Not because it was new, but because I finally realized how rehearsed it all was. She didn't want truth. She wanted convenience. She wanted her version of me. The easy one. The quiet one. The one who didn't make her feel guilty. I took a long breath. "I'm not calling to fight," she said. "But your sister said you were upset, and I just wanted to smooth things over." Smooth things over. Like this was a wrinkle in a shirt, not a lifelong wound. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "This isn't something you can smooth over, Diane." And then, for the first time ever, I hung up on her. A week later, Emily texted, "Hey, family dinner at Dad's next Sunday. You coming? It'll be casual." No. "How are you?" No mention of the hospital. Just a breezy invitation like nothing had happened. Typical. They were good at skipping chapters, pretending the pages between didn't matter. In another life, or maybe just another version of myself, I would have gone. I would have shown up in a nice dress, brought wine, smiled through gritted teeth, and tried to forget everything. But not this time. This time, I didn't answer right away. I let the message sit, and then I replied, "Thanks. But I won't be coming. I'm focusing on healing, and that starts with distance. No anger, no drama, just truth." She left me on red. And that silence? It spoke louder than any apology she never gave. That Sunday came and I didn't dress up. I didn't check Instagram to see who posted what. I didn't pace the floor or question my decision. Instead, I made myself a homemade dinner. Nothing fancy. Just pasta, garlic bread, and a glass of wine. I lit a candle. Not for ambiance, but to mark the moment. The first time I chose to feed myself love instead of chasing it from people who kept it locked up. And I ate in silence. The good kind of silence. Not the cold, empty silence of being ignored. The peaceful, full kind, where you sit with yourself and think, "I didn't betray me this time." That's how healing started for me. Not with therapy, not with confrontations or dramatic walkouts, but with a number. A quiet no that said, "I'm done pretending your table is where I belong." The hospital bill sat on my kitchen counter for days, unopened after the first time, like a ghost I couldn't exorcise. Every time I walked past it, it whispered, "You're on your own." And I believed it, because I was. No one offered to help. Not my mom, not Emily, not even my stepdad, who claimed he wasn't good with emotional stuff. but somehow managed to fund his own mini wine cellar. I kept hearing Diane's voice in my head. You're an adult now. Handle it. So I did. I called the hospital billing department. I sat through the hold music. I explained the situation to a woman who probably heard worse stories daily. And for the first time, I asked for help, without shame. She was quiet for a second, then said, "You might qualify for financial aid. Let me walk you through the form." Something cracked open in me. Not relief, not yet. But maybe the beginning of hope. I filled out the forms. I sent pay stubs, rental agreements, bank statements. I told the truth. I lived paycheck to paycheck. I had no help. And I almost died alone. 2 weeks later, I got the letter. Approved. Reduced by 90%. I stood in my kitchen, holding the paper like it might vanish. And I cried. Because I had done it. I had saved myself. Not with some grand gesture. Not with a movie-style comeback. But by facing the thing they told me I couldn't handle. By believing, maybe for the first time, that I was worth saving. And you know what? That moment meant more than any seat at their table ever could. It started with a comment. On a random Reddit thread, not even a support group, just a post about burnout and family pressure. Someone had written, "It's wild how strangers on the internet care more than the people who raised us." I stared at it, and for some reason, I typed a reply. Not a whole story, just a sentence. I woke up in the ICU and my mom texted me from Italy. "Don't call us." Within minutes, the replies poured in. "That's not okay. I'm so sorry you went through that. You didn't deserve that kind of abandonment. You matter, even if they couldn't see it." One person DM'd me, a nurse. She wrote, "I've seen cases like yours. You weren't just physically at risk. Emotional neglect can literally break the body. You're not weak. You survived." She didn't know me. Didn't owe me anything. And yet, she gave me more compassion in 3 sentences than Diane had managed in my entire life. I responded. We talked a bit. She recommended a trauma-informed therapist in my area, someone she knew personally. At first, I hesitated. Therapy was always something my family dismissed. That's for people who can't handle their problems. Just move on. Talking won't change anything. But I wasn't listening to them anymore. So I made the call. I booked the session. And as I sat in the waiting room a week later, palms sweating, heart racing, I realized something profound. I was rebuilding myself through the kindness of strangers. People who didn't share my last name. People who had no obligation to care. People who saw me anyway. And in that sterile little room with soft music and a tissue box on the table, I took the first deep breath I'd had in years. Because maybe the people who broke me weren't the ones meant to help me heal. Maybe healing could start with being believed. My birthday was never a big deal growing up. Diane wasn't the bake a cake and hang streamers kind of mom. She was the, here's a gift card and don't expect a party kind. But this year, I wasn't expecting anything. And yet, she texted, "Mom, happy birthday. Hope it's a special one. We'll celebrate when we're back. Love you." I read it. Then I reread it. Because I couldn't believe the last line. Love you. That was new. It was like she threw that in there to erase everything. As if saying, love you, could cancel out the ICU. The silence. The abandonment. The photo. The bill. Everything. And maybe to someone else it would have worked. But not for me. Because right below that message was another one, from someone who still followed her on social media. A screenshot of Diane's new post. Her and Emily. Matching dresses, sparkling rosé in hand. Celebrating my girl's birthday in Florence. Family time, proud mama, Emily's birthday. 2 weeks after mine. 2 entire weeks. So not only had she forgotten mine, she had remembered Emily's, gone all out for it, and lied to me about doing the same. And in that moment, I didn't even feel hurt. I felt insulted. Like they thought I was so desperate for crumbs, I wouldn't notice the whole damn cake went to someone else. I didn't reply. I didn't even rage. Instead, I ordered myself takeout, lit a candle, again, and made my own birthday wish. It wasn't for them to change. It wasn't for an apology. It was simple. Let this be the last year I beg people to remember me. Because from now on, I would be the one throwing the party, even if I was the only one invited. I wrote it late at night, the kind of night where the world feels quiet enough to hear your own thoughts clearly, maybe too clearly. It started as a journal entry, but quickly turned into a letter, to her, to Diane. I didn't hold back. You weren't there when I needed you most. Not when I was lying in that hospital bed, surrounded by wires and beeping machines. Not when the doctor asked, "Is there anyone we should call?" And not when I walked back into my apartment alone. I told her everything. About the bill. About the picture from Italy. About Emily's birthday party. About the way she weaponized the word sensitive every time I tried to open up. I wrote until my hand cramped. Until my throat felt tight with everything I hadn't said for decades. And then I stopped. I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, wrote her name on the front. I stared at it for a long time. It felt powerful, cathartic, but also unfinished. Because I realized something. This letter, it wasn't for her. It was for me. She wouldn't read it and suddenly transform into the mother I needed. She wouldn't call me sobbing, apologize for everything, and ask how she could fix it. If anything, she'd get defensive. Or worse, condescending. Turn my pain into an attack. So I didn't mail it. I tucked it into the back of my journal. Because sometimes, healing isn't about being heard by the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's about hearing yourself say, "What happened to me was real, and it mattered," even if they never admit it. It came on a Wednesday. I was folding laundry, the TV playing quietly in the background. One of those calm, unremarkable days that doesn't seem important until it suddenly is. My phone buzzed. One new voicemail. From Diane. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes. Not because I was afraid of what she'd say, but because a part of me still wanted it to be different. I tapped play. "Hi, it's me, your mom." Already, I could hear the strain in her voice. That tight, performative tone she used when she wanted to sound vulnerable but still in control. "I don't really know what's going on with you. You've been so distant. I don't know if you're mad or just going through something. But we're family, and I think it's time you stop holding things against me." I paused it. Holding things against you? Like grief was a grudge. Like abandonment had an expiration date. I hit play again. I just wanted to say I'm sorry if you felt like we weren't there. That wasn't the intention. You've always been different, emotional. It's hard to know what to do with that sometimes. There it was, that word again, emotional, like it was a flaw, a character defect. Anyway, Emily's getting engaged. Big party next month. Would be great to have you there. Let me know. Love you. Click. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it was exactly what I expected. A vague non-apology. A deflection of blame. A bribe wrapped in family news. It was her last voicemail. Not because she died. Not because I blocked her. But because that message made something very clear. She didn't call to reconnect. She called to reset the story, without acknowledging the pages she tore out. I deleted the voicemail. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. Because I finally understood. Some goodbyes don't have to be screamed. Sometimes they're just quiet choices. The kind you make when healing matters more than being understood. I used to think healing came from someone else. An apology? A revelation? A gesture so grand it patched every crack. But that never came. So I made my own version of healing. It started with little things. I bought fresh sheets. Not because I had guests coming, but because I deserved softness. I took myself out to lunch, sat by the window, ordered dessert first, and didn't touch my phone. I let the sun hit my face on purpose, stayed outside long enough to feel present in my own life, and I started talking to myself differently. Not out loud, not in the mirror, but inside, where all the bruises lived. I replaced, "You're too much," with, "You feel deeply. That's a gift." I swapped, "Why can't you get over it?" with, "That pain changed you." And that's okay. Every time I felt abandoned, I answered it with a truth. They left you, but you didn't leave yourself. And slowly, the ache didn't disappear, but it shifted. It became a scar, not a wound, a reminder, not a prison. I gave myself the closure no one else could offer. Not with a ceremony, not with a revenge plot, not even with a perfect ending, just with presence, with the choice to stay, even when others walked away. Because sometimes what you need most isn't someone to come save you. It's the quiet moment where you say, "I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere." The beeping, the sterile lights, the oxygen tube taped to my face. Those memories used to haunt me, fragments of fear stitched together by pain and silence. But now, I look back and see something else. A beginning. Because the ICU didn't just scare me, it stripped me of illusions, of excuses, of every lie I'd told myself about the people who claimed to love me. It was in that cold, humming room, surrounded by machines and strangers in scrubs, that I realized I had been dying long before my body gave out. I had been fading under the weight of being too emotional, too quiet, too much. I had been editing myself down to be digestible to people who never even tried to taste who I really was. And when I woke up, alone, disoriented, confused, I wasn't just waking from sedation. I was waking up to my own life. I saw it all clearly. The birthdays missed, the blame deflected, the version of me they preferred, polished, agreeable, invisible. But I wasn't invisible anymore. My pain had carved space for a truth I couldn't ignore. I deserved better. Not perfect, not grand, just better. People who showed up. Love that didn't come with a ledger. Family that didn't need DNA to be real. And so I stopped chasing people who needed me to shrink. I stopped answering texts that started with, "You're overreacting." I stopped sitting at tables where I had to earn every bite of affection. And slowly, I built something new. A quiet kind of peace. One that didn't need validation. One that began the day I nearly died, and realized I wanted to live on my own terms. Not out of survival, but out of choice. I used to think family was about blood, about who raised you, who shared your last name, who was there in the Christmas photos, smiling even if they didn't mean it. But now I know better. Family is built, not assigned. Chosen, not inherited. And sometimes the people who raised you are the last ones who ever really saw you. These days, my family looks different. It's Maya, who still checks on me twice a week even when I say I'm fine, who drops off groceries when I'm low on energy, who once said, "I don't need to understand everything to stand beside you." It's Zara, my therapist, who holds space for the ugly truths, who reminds me I don't have to be resilient to be worthy. It's the barista at the cafe who remembers my name, the old man who nods at me during morning walks, the online friend who sent me a care package without ever meeting me in person. This is the family I'm building. People who show up. People who don't need a holiday or a hospital bed to prove they care. People who love loudly and softly, with no disclaimers. And most importantly, me. I'm part of this family now. Not as an afterthought. Not as the emotional one. But as someone who gets a seat. Without having to shrink to fit in. And I've learned something sacred. It's never too late to rewrite the definition of home. Never too late to gather the right people around your fire. Never too late to say, This time, I get to choose who loves me. So, no, I don't have the picture perfect family in Tuscany, but I have a dinner table full of warmth, laughter that doesn't come at my expense, love that doesn't come with terms and conditions. And in that quiet, solid space, I'm finally safe. I used to replay it over and over. That first moment, waking up in the ICU, confused, alone, breath shallow, chest tight, wondering what day it was, and then reading the text. We're in Italy, don't call us. It felt like abandonment, because it was. But now I look back and see something else. That was the day I was reborn. Not dramatically, not beautifully, but honestly. Because something in me died that day too. Something that needed to. The version of me that kept proving myself to people who never clapped. The daughter who held in her feelings to keep the peace. The woman who twisted herself into silence just to be tolerated. That version. She didn't survive the ICU, and thank God for that. Because what came after? It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a tear-filled reunion. It wasn't even forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It was rebirth. I started over, day by day, scar by scar, choosing to live in a world where I didn't need their approval to exist. They went to Italy and made memories without me. And I made a life that finally included me. One where my voice is not too loud, my feelings are not too much, my presence is not a burden. One where I wake up every day and say, "You're allowed to be here. You're allowed to take up space. You matter. Still. Always." So if you're reading this, if you've ever been forgotten, overlooked, left behind, let me tell you, you're not broken. You're just becoming. And sometimes it takes being left behind to finally find your way forward.